Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Sports Weekly. I'm your host, Daniel Marlowe. My uh, co-host here, Jeff Marlowe. Uh, this is week 5 of our edition of Sports Weekly high school football. The game that we are covering today was Rensselaer Central versus the Twin Lakes Indians, and Rensselaer came out in this. Rensselaer came out on top of this game with a score of 34-7. And something I want to go over first, real quick. Rensselaer Central had the ball for most of the time of the game. They had 54 total plays, 21 first downs. Twin Lakes had 62 total plays with 13 first downs. But Rensselaer Central's time of possession was a lot more than Twin Lakes. So one of the things I want to start off with was the offense of Rensselaer Central. Corbin Matthews, the quarterback, was 7 of 10 for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. His longest pass was 43 yards, and his completion percentage was 700. And his man in the backfield, Caden Rowland, he had 22 carries for 173 yards, which is a 7.9 yards average per carry, with his longest rush being 34 yards with three touchdowns. So my first question is going to be, what did you really like out of the Rensselaer Central offense?
Well, based on what we'd heard from Coach Meeks the week before, was that they had not finished drives. They had gotten down inside the Hamilton Heights the week before, deep into their territory, and hadn't completed drives. I think a couple of their drives even stalled out inside the Hamilton Heights 10. So I think the one thing that I talked with Coach Meeks a little bit about in the lead up of the week was they wanted to see them finish drives. And I thought that for the most part, Rensselaer did that. And again, what I liked from the Rensselaer offense was the diversity. Even though he said Matthew threw 10 passes, I think he'd coming in after the first 3 weeks, he'd only thrown like 13 passes. So he almost doubled his output in week 4. And I thought, as successful as that was for them, that gives them a little bit more diversity to the offense, where it'll keep people from being able to load up the box maybe quite so much. I think that's still going to be the one thing Rensselaer sees week in and week out, is just based on the history of what Chris Meeks likes to do, is that offense, they're going to see 8 to 9 guys in the box on a regular basis. But if Corbin can be that kind of quarterback where he completes 7 out of 10 every week, then that'll loosen it up enough that I think the running game will benefit.
Yeah, I have to mention Corbin. Like you said, he almost doubled his passing numbers, which, like you said, University usually they run the ball a lot, and I believe if they do pass the ball a lot more, it makes them a lot more dangerous, because you more have to, as an offensive side, you have to guess on your play calls a little more on whether it's a run or a pass. But one thing I want to talk about also about the offensive side, Rensselaer Central, the amount of guys that received the ball in the backfield. There was 7 guys who all received the ball in the backfield. Caden Roman was the main guy. Corbin also had some yards. He was not in the backfield, though, but he also had some QB yards. But some other guys that received the ball in the backfield would be Aaron Barco, Diego Hernandez-Reyes, Carter Ogmore, and Elias McAdow. So even though they were up a big towards the end of the game, do you like to see some of those guys, a lot more of those guys, get touches, just because just keeps the playbook a little bit more open?
Well, the other thing is you don't get guys hurt. You run a risk of Roland, for example, or Reyes getting hurt. in that, late in the game like that. And then if they do have some injuries later in the season, you got some guys who have at least carried the ball. The thing I noticed that I saw from the running game was kind of two things. Obviously, they like to get rolling up in between the tackles, but then they were going to use, Diego Hernandez Reyes a little more on the outside. They used Barco to get to a little bit more of the outside, which again, it keeps the defense honest. Those defensive ends and the linebackers on the outside have to stay home a little bit more when they can get to the outside. Now, the question they'll have coming up for these next couple of weeks as they head into West Lafayette and Lafayette Central Catholic is, can they do that same thing against teams that, at least on paper, are going to be seen as, as having better athletes than what Twin Lakes did, a little more skill, a little more speed. Especially on the outside. So we'll see how, what kind of attack they take. And of course, that's, tomorrow night, we're recording this on a Thursday, so that'll be tomorrow night with West Lafayette at Rensselaer. But I do like the diversification. I like getting guys lots of touches. There was a point there in the second half, I think it might've been the first half, where they even pulled Roland out of the game for not a full series, but there was 3 or 4 plays in a row where he wasn't on the field even. And I think that's, again, that just shows that there's depth there at those positions, but it also is the strength of Chris Meeks' offense year in and year out. They're going to run the ball primarily, and they're going to find ways to get guys the ball and get them yards.
Yeah. Well, talk about getting Diego back on the outside. If you look at the receiving yards here, the leading receiver was Kenny Rowland, but this guy behind him was also Diego, who they threw the ball downfield to, or he would get outside maybe on a half-back screen, or he would just be in the backfield and he would go out, or maybe they would line him up out wide. But he had 3 receptions for 56 yards, and Roland had 3 receptions for 63 yards, and they both had touchdowns. So out of the passing game, how do you like to see maybe like your backup running back being out there out wide, or would you want would you like your running back being out wide, or would you rather have maybe a specific receiver getting out wide?
Yeah. That's just up to an individual coach. I mean, as somebody who's watching the game, broadcasting the game, I don't get too worked up about where you're positioning guys, because they're going to put guys where they think they can be successful. I know one thing you saw with Diego was they were going to, with Diego Hernandez Reyes, they were going to try and get him out into the boundary. They were going to try and get the ball out to him into some space. And then, and interesting enough, with Roland, even though he wasn't lining up, you saw him running a lot of seam routes up the middle or just off the tackle, and running that seam route kind of right down the middle of the field, almost like you would see with a tight end. But it's obvious that, there's trust there in the coaching staff and those 2 kids to get into open space and catch the ball, and then and then see if they can do something with their feet. And I think you saw last week they trusted Corbin to make good reads and make the right throw, with the one exception, his interception, he just didn't make a good read on. But of the other passes, though, so of the other 9 passes, 7 were completed, so he was making good reads. So I think that, that speaks. They don't really have what I would say have a true wide receiver type, offense, so they're just trying to get their running backs into some space a little bit and see if they can get them, allow them to make some plays with their feet.
Yeah, I know that. Noticed that a lot. Them just trying to get running backs out there in the open space. Let's transfer over to the Twin Lakes offense now. They had 62 total plays at 13 first downs. They threw the ball a lot more than we did, but their quarterback, Gavin Bussinger, was only 9 for 22 for 34 yards of passing, with 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, completion percentage of .409, and QB rating of 10.8. And most of the yards went to their main receiver was Francis Sheena, who had 22 yards on 2 receptions, and Reed Richards, who had 9 yards on 2 receptions. And and when their passing game wasn't working, it went back to their senior running back, Jacob Oliver, who had 23 carries, 147 yards. So out of Twin Lakes offense, would you have liked them see them go to the run bit more since the pass wasn't working, or did you like to see them try and stick with the pass and trust their junior quarterback in Gavin Bussinger?
really, on at least the night we saw them, there wasn't much working. I think we figured up they had roughly about 150 yards of total offense, and you're saying 62 plays. So that you do the math there, that's not a very good yard per play average. And they just were struggling. If you take away, I believe it was Oliver who had the one long run, 40 some yards for a touchdown. The offense really didn't do much. You take away that carry, and you're down to around 100 yards of total offense for the night. I don't know Twin Lakes well enough to say whether I like or don't like. I just know that I expected them to be a little better at throwing the ball. They'd been completing a decent percentage, but the other night against Rensselaer, they just never really got in sync. And it wasn't like that Rensselaer was really up big. Until late in the game, late third quarter, when they finally took control of the game. But Twin Lakes just really struggled to get anything consistent going with the running game and the passing game. And so I won't say whether I like it or don't like it. I just think that it was a situation where I think whatever they tried, they felt like wasn't working. I think a lot of that had to do with Rensselaer. I also think it was also a situation where, and again, speed is a relative thing. Speed, you may be faster than the team you're playing this week, but next week the other team may be faster than you. And the other night against Twin Lakes, Rensselaer felt, I think, proved out that they could match up one-on-one on the outside with the receivers, and they really were loading the box with 8 and 9 people. And I really think that stymied the running game. So, and Twin Lakes not being able to hit on passes outside, I think just really took away any chance they had to make the game go the way they wanted it to go.
Yeah, go back to your statement about them only 150 yards. They had 150 yards. The kid, Jacob Oliver, had his longest rush was 43 yards. You take that away, they are down to 107 yards in total, which is nowhere close to Rensselaer's total yards of 302 of 143 reception yards. So they were able, Rensselaer on the other side, except Rensselaer compared to Twin Lakes, they were able to split up the ball pretty evenly with some high reception numbers and high rushing numbers. But if you look at Twin Lakes side of the ball, they only had 150 rushing yards with 42 reception yards, which is a big difference, especially when your quarterback throws the ball 22 times. I want to transfer over to the defensive side with the Rensselaer defensive line. They had 2 sacks on the night by sophomore Brian Camarina and junior Adam Ayler. And they also had 2. That's all I have on my papers that I got from Matt's reps.
That's fine.
They had two interceptions. One by Caden Doyle, a sophomore, and senior Trenton Simmons. So out of the defensive side, even the pressures they got too. What did you like out of the Rensselaer defensive line?
At least on that night, Rensselaer defensive line was the better unit. They were better than the Twin Lakes offensive unit. They were the best unit, I thought, on the Rensselaer defense. They really set the tone. They were getting across the line of scrimmage. And even though you said Jordan Creed didn't have any sacks, he was getting in the backfield and creating some plays to happen, even if it went away from him. But I thought that front line of Creed and Camarina and Ayler, and I'm forgetting who their other down lineman was, but those 4 really controlled the line of scrimmage. They played a lot of the game realistically, other than that one run by Oliver for 43 yards. They really played on the other side of the offense of the line of scrimmage. So I really thought that the defensive line for Rensselaer had an outstanding game, and we'll see again relative to that game, they were the best unit on the field in terms of those 2 teams.
Yeah, pretty sure the other down lineman you're missing was Brian Camarina. I went over tackle numbers. So the leading tacklers were Caden Doyle, the sophomore, the senior Trent Simmons, and junior Adam Ayler. And up close behind was senior Avery Reyes and senior Jordan Creed. So and they also had a lot of tackle for losses. Adam had 2 tackles for loss. Brian had 2 tackles for loss, and Jordan Creed had 2 tackles for loss, and so did Chaz Mullen. So most of their front line had at least 2 tackles per loss, with a couple of defensive back guys that tackles for losses. Do you want to Do you want to? Would you? Is there anything that you would? You know they did as well. They did last week. Is there anything you might change game plan wise for a team like West Lafayette? Different from Twin Lakes.
Well, I haven't seen them enough in the last couple of years because we've been out doing a lot of other games. We just happened to be able to do the Rensselaer game this past week. It's usually taught to be, it seems like they really emphasize pursue the ball. And I think the one thing that you're going to probably want to work on this week with West Lafayette and next week with CC is misdirection or some type of counter type plays where those teams with some good personnel, as well, who are going to try and counter that. They're going to try and get you to flow one way and then come back the other. And so I think that's the one thing you have to guard against a little bit is over pursuit. But and then they also got to be able to have contain your DNs and your outside linebackers have to be able to contain. Especially the quarterbacks these next 2 weeks have to try and be able to contain them in the pocket and the running game. But that's a tough sell because West Lafayette's going to come in as number one, one poll has them number one. But I think that's the one thing, that defensive line just has to really play assignment football coming up against some of the, at least on paper, the higher ranked teams they're going to be playing. I think they've got the talent. And I think they've got, they got scheme, but they just got to really make sure to play assignment football because if they don't, then that's where I think the counters and the cutbacks may hurt them because they really like the pursuit of the ball.
Yeah, I was just saying that they had a lot of tackles down the backfield, as I mentioned, all their tackle for losses. Which brings me to Twin Lakes side of the ball. They had two guys in double digits for tackles. Senior Caden Disson with 15 tackles, and freshman Robertson with 10 tackles. Other than those two, they had Landon Arthur, the junior, 7 tackles. Leo Dellinger, the sophomore, 6 tackles, and Gage Custer, the junior, 7 tackles. And CJ Brummett, the junior, 8 tackles. So out of those group of people, no one got more than 3, actually 4. What did you see Twin Lakes not? What was Twin Lakes not able to do on the defensive side of the ball that would have stopped or maybe have helped them out a little bit more that they just didn't do?
Tackle better. Tackle better. I know that's flip, but I mean, they struggled to tackle and they were not getting across. And I didn't think the offensive line was overly dominant for Rensselaer. I thought they did a good job, but Twin Lakes just really never made a push, in my opinion. They just were willing to accept the block and stay where they were. And I think that group has to get a little more aggressive on the defensive line because a lot of times Rensselaer was, whoever the runner was, whether it was Matthew, whether it was Roland, whether it was Reyes, they were getting really almost to the second level before they were at least getting any real contact. And so that Twin Lakes defensive line just has to get more aggressive. They got to get more push on the ball. And that's, the few times they did, they got tackles for losses. They were, especially on some of the early plays where Rensselaer tried to get outside. But really, in between the tackles, they struggled all night to really make tackles. And like I said, those running backs for Rensselaer and stuff got into that second level pretty easily.
Yeah, they did. Talking about the Twin Lakes defensive line, they did have 4 sacks. I know they had a couple in the fourth quarter when the freshman QB Cohen Westfall came in for Corbin Matthews, and they also had 2 interceptions by the senior Caleb Turner. But the sacks, 3 sacks for Caden Disson, the senior, and 1 sack for the junior Landon Arthur. So going back to the defensive line and maybe the secondary, do you see anything really besides the tackling part that the defensive backs maybe like? Did you see them get like? Did you see the defensive backs get burnt by the receivers a lot, or they just missed coverages?
More missed coverage than I thought got just totally beat, got burned. They especially the first couple times that the Rensselaer was able to get to the ball to rolling down the middle. To me, that's assignment football. You got to, but that's, Twin Lakes was playing a lot of too deep early in the game. And I think that was, that's a good way to beat that. And so you getting down the seam, but that's just better communication, better assignment football. But they, I wouldn't say we just totally beat them, but Rensselaer took advantage of the matchups they had, and whether it was Reyes on the outside or rolling down the middle for the most part, that they did a good job of that.
Yeah, I did notice that they did leave a lot of open space down in the middle of the field in the boundary. So I'm gonna move over to the Rensselaer kicker. I like to give the kickers credit because you gotta depend on them. So Carter Drone, the senior, he didn't have any field goals on that night because Rensselaer mostly got a touchdown every drive, except for a couple of times they had to punt the ball. But he made all 4 of his PATs, and so I know Rensselaer's has had good kickers in the past. So what do you have to say about the continuing support by Meeks for his kickers?
Well, most high school coaches are not going to run their kickers out there for a lot of field goals. They see too many of the negatives on that because you got to have a good snap, you got to have good blocking up front, you got to have a good hold, and then you got to have a kicker you trust. And so there's not very many high school coaches who are willing to trust their kickers from very far out. Whereas that's part of that's just I've always talked to coaches about that I think they get thinking that it's the NFL or the college rule where the ball's going to come back to the spot of the kick and things like that. In the high school rules, if you get a field goal attempt is really no different than a punt. If you miss it and it goes across the goal line, it's a touchback. If it goes and it lands in between the 10 and the goal line, it's down just like a punt would be. So I think sometimes they forget about that aspect. I think to me, there's a less risk of it because of that, but that's coming from the old official side of me. I thought Carter kicked the ball well. I think he did miss a PAT later in the game. I think he missed 1 and then they went for 2 on the last touchdown. But, again, 4 out of 5, 80% is pretty solid percentage for a high school kicker. He didn't kick last year. There was a different kicker last year. So, but just pretty typical for what I see of high school football in the past. There's not too many field goals attempted, let alone made. So, but Carter, I think, showed he had the leg, did a nice job on the kickoffs. He was getting them, he was getting them deep enough that I think you could trust him to go for a 25, 30 yard, 40 yard field goal and see what happens. But again, that's Chris Meeks is had some good kickers in the past let do that, but most high school coaches, they'd rather just go for it. The analytics of it now will tell you that there's better numbers in trying to go for it on 4th down than kick the field goal or punting. So.
I totally agree with everything you said, especially I think there is less risk in it, like you said, just because if you kick the ball, it goes inside the 5. Now they're backed up in their own end zone, so why not take the chance? Maybe even though they do miss the field goal, it puts a little bit more trust in the kicker that your coach trusts them. So that's all I have for you. Do you have anything for me that you would like to maybe mention or something I missed?
No, I don't think you missed anything. I thought it was a good discussion. The only thing I'll ask you guys, as I mentioned earlier, we got West Lafayette and Rensselaer here at home at Rensselaer this week. So without making a prediction, what do you think are keys to the game for Rensselaer?
I want to mention that is their homecoming game, so it's a pretty big game for them also. But I think some of the keys to the game are don't turn the ball over. Keeping possession of the ball, I think, is a big thing against a team like West Lafayette because the more times you have the ball, the longer you have the ball, is less time, less possessions they get to score points on you. So then you have more opportunity to maybe keep it close game. Even just running the clock down, like getting a snap off, writing down the play clock, even that can just make a difference in the game because you're just holding on to the ball a lot more. Protecting the QB if they do try and pass the ball a little bit like they did to Lynx when they had 10 passes. Protecting the QB, especially a young QB, is a big difference between maybe an older QB who's a little more experienced. Protecting your QB is a big thing because if you don't protect them, younger QBs get a little bit more jumpy, more trigger happy. They may want to throw the ball, force it into a tight coverage, or they get a little jumpy. They run right into the defensive lineman, and you get sacked for maybe 5-6 yards, or you just makes a bad decision. Another key to the game, I think, out of the game is protecting the run. If you can protect the run, get holes open for your guys. Protect the ball. I think it'll be pretty good. And the defensive side, for your keys, just make the tackles, wrap them up, bring them down. Maybe if you're trying to get a fumble to turnovers, don't try and push it out yourself. Wrap them up, hold them, and let someone else come in and try and push it out from behind or from the front. Keep your eyes on your receivers. Don't get grabby. Don't get yourself a holding or pass interference call. And then just watch the quarterback, watch the receivers, watch the running back, watch where the ball goes. And that's all. Protecting the ball is my biggest key.
Yeah, I just think that it'll be very interesting to see how they match up with the athletes that West Lafayette tends to have. That's really been their biggest struggle with West Lafayette over the last several years, is just, the athletes, especially on the outside and at the skill position. So to me, I agree with all the points you said, especially on the defense. You got to tackle. You can't let those guys get in space, and you can't let those guys, get a bunch of yards after contact.
Yeah, that's probably one of my biggest keys on the defense side is yards of the contact. If you miss a tackle, especially in the secondary, your defensive back, maybe they get past your first line of linebackers, and you get in secondary and you can't wrap them up, it might be a long night, because if you can't wrap them up on the secondary defensive backs, they're going to be running all over you. So even if they do get past that first line linebackers and you are the defensive back making a tackle, even though it is a first down, you're still stopping them, which gives you another chance to maybe get in the ball turnover. So it's just stops. You got it stops. Even maybe if they get a couple first downs and they're at the 30, you don't know how good their kicker is. So just just defensive side, stop the ball. Offensive side, protect the ball. Those are my two main keys.
I would agree. That's a good analysis.
So is that all you got for me?
That's all I got.
All right. This is that's the end of this episode of Sports Weekly High School Sports Review. Tune in next week we won't have an episode. 2 weeks we will. I'm pretty sure Lowell versus KV. We're reviewing that game. So thanks for tuning in. I'm your host Daniel Marlowe, your co-host Jeff Marlowe. So that is Sports Weekly. See you guys in 2 weeks.